Ho ho ho, wrap the presents, sing some carols and get the stockings out. It's that time of year again, and Christmas always gets me thinking about my childhood, and being born in the 90s I always reminisce of the early 2000s, which for me was the golden age of video games. So many franchises or genres redefined, with many of them inspiring games today. Of course many have aged as well as the blue cheese at the back of my fridge that wasn't blue upon purchase. But their influence on gaming today is indisputable. 2002 in particular holds a special place in my heart. So many titles were continuously frying my brain with how innovative and awesome they were. Christmas of said year saw Santa Claus, aka my very generous mother, buy my brother and I this brand new machine called Xbox. With it came Halo, Midtown Madness 3, Crash Bandicoot The Wrath of Cortex, and one that has always seemed to live in my head rent-free, TimeSplitters 2, which has just seen its 20th birthday. How long ago was that exactly? Well, the same year Attack of the Clones and Sam Raimi's Spider-Man released in cinemas, and Michael Jackson held a baby over a balcony. That long ago. Let it sink in. And they always come back around every year. Not Michael Jackson, but comfort games in the build up to Christmas whilst you wait for those new shiny ones that you couldn't buy because your mum was your salary. TimeSplitters 2 was always a Christmassy game for me because I associate it with one of the best gifts I ever got. Now it's been quite a few years since I last jumped through the time portal, so to celebrate TimeSplitters 2's 20th anniversary and for my own holly jolly trip down memory lane, I decided to get out the old game and slap it into the Series X just to see how well it does, or does not, hold up today. And the results were surprising in both outcomes as I give you my review of the game. Now the game did come with a multiplayer mode which I rinsed hours into back in the day, but it's hard to arrange sleepovers these days with friends who want to play games like this, and it also came with an arcade mode with various objectives such as smashing windows and knocking off zombie heads, which extend the longevity of the game, but for this video my focus is on the campaign. But these other modes are nice additions, creating what I would call the first Call of Duty package. Created by Free Radical Design, the TimeSplitters series began in the year 2000 with its first entry, however I don't think I was the only one to be introduced to the series with its sequel 2 years later. Time-hopping first-person shooters with shooting mechanics in the vein of preceding titles GoldenEye and Perfect Dark, it has its own unique art style recognisable through some other Free Radical games such as Second Sight. The overarching plot of TimeSplitters 2 is about as vague as Jeffrey Epstein's suicide. Two Space Marines, Sergeant Cortez and Corporal Hart, intercept a space station occupied by aliens known as TimeSplitters, as they are stealing a collection of time crystals used to traverse to different points in time to change history, with their goal terminating the human race by changing history to bring time itself to its destruction. The fact these aliens were even called TimeSplitters in the first place I was completely oblivious to until all these years later, until I read it on an objective much later in the game during my recent playthrough. It was like that moment when you're watching a movie and the character says the title, then you sit up in your chair like, whoa dude, he just said the title of the film. It all comes full circle. Upon the Space Marines' arrival, the TimeSplitters take the crystals, jump through a time machine, and it is down to Cortez to go in after them to recover the crystals and kick alien ass.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Now we are thrown into this game and there is no real backstory to this whole scenario, who our enemy or our two heroes are. In fact the story has about as much depth to it as a puddle in a drought, but that's not to say it's not friggin' awesome. Each level takes place in a different period of time, playing out like its own short story as Cortez puts on the shoes of Scott Bakula and takes the body of someone else entirely as he enters these different places. We play a different character to reflect the location and time we are in, and each level begins with a briefing to set the scene before we hop through the portal. We have an investigator sneaking through a secret research facility in 1990 Siberia, a hard-boiled detective 1932 downtown Chicago, a jester lurking through the cursed Notre Dame in 1895, a wing commander in 2280 in his return to Planet X.
What's your damage, sir?
The engine's shaky, but I'll be okay if it doesn't overheat. Uh-oh.
A framed hacker in the most realistic representation of 2019 Neo Tokyo, a bounty hunter 1853 Wild West, a James Bond, or more accurately Austin Powers style secret agent in 1972 Atom Smasher.
I thought this had your stench all over it, Kalos.
An explorer seeking fortune in the Aztec ruins of 1920, the one level in the game with traditional puzzles which I really liked, a Terminator-style war as a cyborg baby man in 2315 Robot Factory, and finally Sergeant Cortez himself escaping the TimeSplitter threat at the space station in the present of 2401. Now what's kind of confusing with this is each character we control has their own narrative within their respective worlds, and what we have to remember is each of these characters are Cortez infiltrating each time zone to seek the lost crystals, and each story has incorporated the crystal in the presence of the Time-Splitters in interesting ways, giving each period, no matter whether it's in the past or the future, a sci-fi scent, which is very cool, but all these characters have their own personas. So you're kind of thinking, are they Cortez or not? But if so, is he self-aware in using these different personas as a means to an end? Then how does he know who he is in each time, everything about the location and its surrounding affairs? I think it was great philosopher Sarah Connor who said something along the lines of, time travelling is a mindfuck, and if thought about too long, nothing ever really makes sense. So TimeSplitters 2's story is best experienced if experienced like there is no overarching plot to experience, otherwise you're in for a time-splitting headache.
Gracious! Come on, you stupid! I want that son of a... I want him dead, you hear me? Dead!
Personally, I would have liked to see more of an overarching plot with the central characters, even if that was in the form of a cutscene with both Cortez and Hart between time jumps, but regardless I think this is just a product of the time it was released, and it is hard to ignore the quality of what we do have. The game very much feels like an anthology, a cabinet of sci-fi curiosities, each with their own story to tell, and it just works incredibly well. This stops the levels ever becoming stale, and it gives a sense of excitement, wondering what will come next. Even remembering what most of the levels were, that sense of wonderment was still there. The characters and the settings have their own unique charm to them, and each of the stories have interesting premises, all of which could honestly hold up as their own individual game, as each cleverly and hilariously parodies their influences. 1895 Notre Dame, for example, hammer horror with dank castles and big titties.
So pure.
1853 Wild West, cowboys, pistols, and lots of spaghetti. Both classic film noir and neo-noir. They may be mistaken as cliché, but this is kind of the whole point. Each is filled with passion in their design, in their themes, tones, visuals, and incredible soundtracks. I mean seriously, some of these soundtracks I've been playing in the background of life whilst I've been killing time. But preventing the killing of time is the name of the game, so how does it all play today, 20 years later? Well, in many ways it plays like an old game that has frustrating design, but alas it has aged incredibly well, yet my biggest takeaway is TimeSplitters 2 likes to contradict itself with how smart it is, or was. Across the game's 10 levels I experienced nostalgia, shock at how awesome the game mechanics still were, and anger at how much they really piss me off. Each level has primary objectives, a time crystal to collect, and a number of side objectives to complete. I finished every level and completed every objective in the game, and whilst the side objectives did not really give me anything, they were often great for giving more context to the level's story and increasing their length, as some of these levels are really short. Objectives range from killing targets in the form of boss battles, rescue missions, collectibles, escorting missions, tailing missions, destroying items in the world like barrels of whiskey or bombs. We begin with one of the most iconic first-person shooter levels of all time, at least for me, Siberia 1990. The first port of call was to turn off the default hold to crouch and the inverted aim. I mean, does anyone actually really play like this outside of flight controls? It makes me feel like I've drank 3 barrels of illegal whiskey and someone tells me to look up, only to look down. With that turned off, I was ready to take aim, which proved far more difficult than I remembered. Moving with the left analog stick and aiming with the right, there is no hold left trigger to aim down the sights like most modern shooters. Instead, clicking in the right analog stick gives you a crosshair to make hitting targets at a distance easier, or at least that is what I thought would happen. Moving the crosshair does not move the entire character body like most games nowadays, but moves the crosshair across the screen, and it needs holding in place with your thumb whilst you straighten up a shot. I don't know whether I felt this way back in the day, but it makes it difficult to get an accurate shot. It just wasn't easy to hold it in a steady position, and it has nothing to do with an undisclosed crack addiction. Promise. I restarted this opening level 3 times due to the fiddly control of this, and decided perhaps the best approach to this was stealth, until I was being shot through walls from who knows where. Now I do have to mention this game is full of little nuisances like this, glitches that break the game at times that require me to restart a level, but at times the game design itself made me want to smash my head into a brick wall. There are no objective markers in the game, which I really like, however this sometimes worked against me in that I wouldn't know where to go, or I would use an item in the wrong way. A couple of examples of this. Return to Planet X, I was walking around for about half an hour like a damn fool, unable to find where to go. only to find there was a massive gaping hole in the ship I was in the first place to take me to a new area. Yes, admittedly this may have been me being an ass. But another is in the game's second level. I picked up some dynamite which was to be used on a safe. Not knowing this, I instead used it to blow up some goons, which forced me to reset from the last checkpoint. Now this wouldn't be too bad, and by no means did I want the game to hold my hand. In fact, I like this style of game design where you have to figure out things yourself by exploring levels, and experimenting I absolutely love, and we need more of it in games today. What makes it frustrating in TimeSplitters 2 though is the totally abysmal checkpoint system. This is downright terrible in that if you fail an objective or have to reload due to a glitch, so much progress is lost and large parts of the level have to be replayed, and when this happens for something out of your control it can be blood boiling, aka shitty escort missions with shitty AI who walk into certain death like they just don't give a toss, or a certain tailing mission in Neo Tokyo that seemed borderline impossible as a kid, and even now. I spoke to 3 friends recently about this game and each one told me they never got past the Tokyo mission because the stealth was so difficult, and it took me so many tries now to when in hindsight it's a pretty short level once you know the exact route of the target and their blind spots after failing a dozen times. It's very much trial and error. But these are all sporadic moments of frustrating design choices and they never outweigh what the game does well. In fact, the game is brilliant, and this is due to solid shooting with a huge assortment of weapons and enemies and the physics that were way ahead of their time. All of the weapons feel absolutely fantastic, each having their primary firing mode and many having a secondary attack, like an AK-47 with a grenade launcher attachment, and all of the weapons are from the different eras you're playing. Pistols, shotguns, plasma rifles, snipers and explosives, the standard for first-person shooters, but due to the ever-changing design and function of them I always enjoyed the weapon I was equipped with and it felt consistently fresh. Each weapon comes with some really cool animations too. The chambers pull back with each shot, and some weapons such as the shotgun have their shells attached to the side of the gun, and as you are reloading from there it also reflects how many shells you have left. The attention to detail on the weapons was way ahead of its time, and even many games now don't put that much effort into them. There are no reload animations though, which was kind of annoying, with each gun reloading by bowing down before its victim before blasting it away. Now I did find there were some discrepancies with the damage output. Shooting out cameras with a pistol took less damage than with a sniper rifle, and a Luger pistol was less damaging than a crossbow. Honestly, looking back at all these weapons, I'm convinced the crossbow is the best gun in the game, which is weird to think when the very next level I was using a plasma pistol with ricocheting bullets. But regardless, each weapon was a thrill. Now I mentioned the zoom in was a pain to use, and honestly I was held back in the first few levels due to how custom I have become to aiming down the sights in modern shooters. But here in TimeSplitters 2, hip fire is the best form of attack, as it doesn't take much manual aim, as the aim assist is strong with this one. As long as your victim is in front of you, whether that be a robot, gangster, alien or chimpanzee, you will be guaranteed a hit, and once I was used to this I realised the killing is easier than it first appeared. Unless you are fighting these flying alien bug things found in Return to Planet X or the game's final level, I just couldn't hit them no matter what, to the point where they would just ruin me. The final level, against a very unforgiving timer, I ended up just sprinting past these so I didn't have a rage-fueled aneurysm. All of this though is not to say the game is easy. In fact, it is a pretty difficult game. You collect health and armour, the latter of which is vital to your survival when fighting waves of various enemies, and this depletes at a pretty rapid pace when being ambushed by pointy lead projectiles. And despite more or less always hitting your targets from hipfire, enemies can take a lot of damage. And then take into consideration environmental damage from explosive barrels, fire and otherworldly threats, the combat does require strategy from the player, taking cover, flanking enemies, and it feels great when on the surface it looks like a basic corridor shooter. And this leads me into what is perhaps simultaneously the most impressive and most dated part of TimeSplitters 2, and that is just how smart it is with its design and how it contradicts itself with how smart it really is. You have to think outside of the box with its physics, but not so much outside the box you come up with your own creative ideas as a player. Each smart mechanic is very specific. I felt the game was smart and I even smarter for figuring it out, but I could only go so far. For instance, I would catch fire in Siberia, and to put it out I had to take a shower. A great idea, but it was one very specific shower that I would have to run across the entire level to get to, yet there were fire extinguishers scattered throughout the level. Shooting them would cause them to spray all over the place, yet this would not put me out, only the shower would do so. Or another example, pouring a line of gunpowder to an explosive barrel to break someone out of prison in the Wild West, but a gunshot would not light the gunpowder. It had to be a very specific exploding box that would light it when shot. This is all, what do they call it? A double-edged spear, where it adds puzzles into the gameplay that you have to think about to solve, but sometimes the solution was quite extreme, when there were other easier solutions all around if we're looking at this realistically. In today's gaming climate, this made TimeSplitters 2 at times feel a little basic in a way, but again, this is what I would call a symptom of the times. Video game evolution has made the players more creative and self-thinking due to big brain game design, and I don't want to take away the credit from TimeSplitters 2 that it deserves, because for a 20-year-old game, it is very, very impressive. In 2002 it was a big deal how advanced this game was from the previous generations, just how we have advanced now from the TimeSplitters 2 generation. And there is no doubt the passion and craft put into this game inspired the many first-person shooters and games in general that have followed in TimeSplitters 2's footsteps. What a great game to return to this Christmas. Tell me, do you or did you have games you always return to? What are your thoughts on TimeSplitters 2? Let me know in the comments below. Thumbs up the video if you like it, thumbs down if you didn't. And want to give me a Christmas prezzy? Subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching and see you on the next one.
Merry Christmas, you filthy animal. And a Happy New Year.